Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks workshop. Got another little project for us that we're going to get started on. This one came from North Carolina, and it's obviously an Ovation Mandolin. It's really got no big issues. The customer's just wanting a different setup on it. And he sent along some parts that he wants me to make and put into this mandolin. Up here where he has a plastic nut, he has sent along some ivory, and he wants an ivory nut made. And I'm going to do that. And you guess what that is? I can tell what it is when I look at it here close. It's a buffalo horn, and it's been, you can see where it was hollow in the center here, and it's been smashed together under very high pressure, obviously. And it's now one more or less solid piece. He wants me to make the nut out of the buffalo horn, so that's what we're going to do. And he's looking for a little bit more radius on the saddle to match the radius of the fretboard, and so we're going to give our best shot to that too. Now this is going to be a custom made saddle. I can't put my normal saddle in this. And I can't make it on my normal jig that I would normally make this kind of thing in. So this is going to be completely handmade from scratch, and so will this, for that matter. And we'll bring you along for the ride as we make those parts. I have the strings off of this Ovation mandolin. The only thing I'm doing now is I'm just going to level all the frets. And the reason I want to do that is he's looking for a real good setup. And unless the frets are absolutely perfectly level, you can't get a real good setup. It's getting pretty good now. Okay, I believe that's pretty good. Now what we'll do next is we'll recrown each one of the frets and make them round on the top again. And we basically make them round almost. I don't try to file every bit of flatness out of there because you've just spent all that time getting them perfectly level. So I don't want to lose that level. So we're just going to basically recrown off the squareness, and so that it looks like it's round. It'll be more of an optical illusion than anything. Now I know that 99% of the folks that are out there in this world today would say you have to mask all this off and keep from scratching it, you know, with this. I've been doing it for over 30 years, and you know, I could count on one hand the number of times I've actually had a little light scratch in here. And I've done thousands of these. Just looking down through there to see if they all look like they're uniformly the same shape, and they all look pretty good. And as you will see, I did not make any scratches on the fretboard whatsoever without masking it off. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to polish these frets with just a very fine sandpaper. And I say very fine, it's not as fine as some people use. I'll probably use somewhere around 320, something like that. I got a piece of water dry 320, and I'm just going to go over these like this. And the reason I do this, I'm not trying to make these things look like a mirror, like, you know, and it's okay to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't go for the looks as much as I go for functionality. And basically I just want them smooth so that you don't feel any rough spots or anything as you're sliding your fingers up and down the fret. So that's all I'm going for. And this cleans them up, makes them look nice, makes them all look real uniform. It shines them up, makes them look like brand new, really. And you notice I'm doing it this way rather than doing it this way. And the reason is I'm just trying to keep that levelness again. I want to keep everything, you know, equal. Equal amount of pressure. I don't want any low spots or high spots, and I can regulate that by going this way real good. And you think, well, okay, that's really dirtying up the fingerboard, and it is. And that's okay, because I've got another step that we do on that. And I do it on every one anyway, so now I'm just working on those corners so that they're not sharp, that you don't feel those corners. And that's pretty good. It looks pretty good. And now I just clean that off. And now the fretboard itself is scuffed from the sandpaper. And so what I do now is I take a single edge razor blade, which I do this anyway, even if I don't use the sandpaper on it. And the reason I do it is this gets rid of any of those slight indentions and things that are on the fretboard from your fingers and from the strings wearing. And one last sweep there, and that should take care of that. Now we should have a perfectly level and smooth fretboard. We're going to start by making the new nut out of the ivory. And the first thing I'm going to do, well, first thing I did do was I just laid this nut that's in there and just checked it for fit and made sure that it's a good pattern that I want to use. And the only negative on it here is that it rocks. It doesn't sit in the groove flat. So I don't know what the problem is there. I'm going to look at that, and I'm going to make that groove flat on the bottom so that the nut will sit in there good and flat, and that it doesn't rock forwards and backwards, that it basically sticks right there. I'm also going to probably leave the new one a little bit thicker. This one here, like I said, it's kind of loose in there, so I'm going to probably leave this one a couple thousandths thicker so that when we put it in there, it's in there to stay, it doesn't move. What I'm doing now is I'm cleaning out the bottom of this joint here where the nut is going to sit. I've also scraped down the end of the fretboard so there's no old glue or anything on there. I noticed that this side was lower than this side. Whenever you would set the nut on there, or even this straight edge on here, there would be a gap underneath here. And so I've been scraping on the other side here to try to level that out perfectly flat and smooth. If anything, I mean, it's not very much. We're talking about deepening this slot a little bit, which isn't a bad thing on this one because it was pretty shallow, and it was probably not even as deep as the veneer is thick here on this. So that'll give it a little bit more bite when it sits in there. And now when I look at it, there's much less gap underneath this end. I have a feeling, a suspicion, that this is not perfectly flat either. And it doesn't look like it is. So I'm going to, this is the pattern, now you understand, so I'm not too worried about it, but I'm going to go ahead and flatten it out just a little bit, just to see how it fits in the slot now. I think we're good shape, and yeah, that looks like we've got something to work with there now. So now we can go ahead and make this one. As I said, I'm going to make this one a few thousandths. I'm actually probably going to start by making it about 5 or 10 thousandths bigger, because if you can, I don't know if you'll be able to see this wobble, but there's a little wobble. You can, and that means it's just not in the slot's just a hair too wide for this saddle, so, or for the nut rather. So we're going to make this nut a little bit wider to make it fit in that slot real snug when it goes in there. I've measured this nut across here, and it's pretty uniform. It's 175 thousandths across here, and so I'm going to shoot for 185 thousandths on this, and you can always go smaller. Well, I'm actually not sure if I caught that on video or not, so I'll just kind of reenact what I did. The old nut was 175 thousandths. I knew I wanted this one to be thicker, so I took this one down to 185 thousandths, which is 10 thousandths more. Actually, right now it's measuring 184 thousandths, so it's about 9 thousandths more. So I test fitted it in the slot of the mandolin there, and it fits perfectly snug. I mean, there's no play at all. It fits exactly like it should fit. So now we've got a blank to start working with, and now we'll begin to profile it to look like this nut. What I do is I take a very sharp pencil and I profile on two sides how the saddle should match up with the neck. Just going to touch up the ends very lightly. We're going to see how it fits on this now. It should fit, and it seems like it fits pretty darn good. Probably just need to take a hand file to it a little bit now. I'm doing some very detailed fitting on this right now. First, give me the profile of the curve of the fretboard. I'm now going to trace over the top of the old one and just try to keep the pencil fairly level. That'll just kind of give me another reference there. Looks like the old one and the new line I drew are pretty much in parallel, so we know that that arch there is a pretty good arch. And the bottom line is still a little proud of where we need to be, but I'm going to take it over to another sander now that I have set up to grind these nuts. This is the fret side of the nut, and so this angle then will taper away from the fret side. 15 degrees is not a bad starting place. I'm going to put on my respirator and we'll give her a go here. Might give you just another pro tip. These tables often are not close enough to the disc. So what I do is I take this piece of plastic, this sacrificial piece of plastic, and I just hold it by hand right up close to the disc. And that way I can get right up there on these little small parts, and they won't get sucked down between the table and the disc. And it's much safer that way. So it's just a little pro tip there that you can use a piece of sacrificial plastic or even a piece of sacrificial wood and get closer then with these little tiny parts up to your disc sander. Went to 25 degrees. You can probably see a pretty good angle on there now. It could even be a little more than that. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'll take a file and round this off some more to make it look more like a standard nut. And anyway, I've got her cut down where the pencil line is just barely showing. Again, I would rather leave it proud, and we'll take it off with a file and do it by hand when we get real close. We've got her dry fitted up, and you can see it's still plenty high. And this back angle is pretty good, but we're going to round that off now with a regular file. This little tiny vise is very handy for such things. And so I've got it in the vise here, and I'll just be rounding it off here on the back side. The nut is installed in the fretboard, and try to give you a close-up here. Will it focus? Sometimes it will and sometimes it won't. And you can see how I've rounded that over there now, and it looks real nice. It looks just like a factory type nut. Now the corners are still sharp on the edges here yet, and we'll take care of that too. We're going to round those off so that you don't feel those sharp corners. I have this slot cut into my table here, and it looks like, and it was a mistake, I'll be honest with you. I think I cut it with a circular saw years and years ago. But I use this slot all the time to just hold little pieces when I'm filing them or whatever. So it was a mistake that worked out good in my favor. Okay, that looks really nice. It's just about as nice looking as it can be. Now we're going to start working on the string grooves. Years and years ago, I made this silly little template, and you can see here it's got notches in it. These are the string grooves for the nut on the mandolin. These are the string grooves for the saddle on the mandolin. And that's all I use. I've been using it for over 20 years. Haven't had any complaints that I'm aware of, so that's how I do it. Okay, now that we've got the nut made, the fretboard level, and of course we've still got the original saddle here. I'm going to use the original saddle as kind of a sacrificial lamb, probably. We're going to now test the intonation. We're going to put a few strings on here. So we'll put one of each pair on here and just check for intonation. And I'll be marking on this saddle here to get the intonation right. And then when I make the buffalo horn, I'm probably only going to have one, maybe two chances at best to get the saddle out of this buffalo horn, so I don't want to make any mistakes on that. So we'll use this one here to get it right. And this one here, in my opinion, is not a very good one anyway. There's a lot of play in it. It just moves around, and every time you turn it over, it falls out, which is an annoyance to me. I really like them in there snug. They don't have to be crazy tight, but I want them in there snug where they're not going to fall out. Well, this customer from North Carolina, he's thinking it all through. He's provided all the strings, and I'm glad he did, because I don't keep in stock mandolin strings that have the nuts on the end of them. All my mandolin strings are loop-in. Well, this one needs nuts, so I'm glad he sent the strings along. I've got the 4 strings on the mandolin, and I'm trying to tune. It's really touchy. These tuning keys seem to make a lot of adjustment really fast. Okay, that's right on the money. When I noted at the 12th fret, it's between 10 and 20 cents sharp. So about 15 cents sharp. So what I'm doing is I'm marking back here on the saddle where I think the string needs to come off of the saddle. And whenever it's sharp, that means this is too short. So I'm moving the mark back to make the string longer here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this nut end high and proud, cutting them close to these marks that I have, and then I'll be able to try to, fine-tune it by filing it and getting it down to the last little detail. I learned a long time ago that the first thing you have to do when you're working with a natural material, like deer antler for instance, or in this case buffalo horn, is you have to establish a flat. So you got to make something flat so you can work off of that. And once you get one thing flat, well, then you can get another thing flat. But I'm going to flatten this flat surface here first. And this is relatively flat on this one side, and this looks to be the thicker side, which is the side I want to make the saddle out of. And so we'll work on trying to get a flat area in this right here first. Believe it or not, this is not the first time I've worked with buffalo horn. I used to make picks out of buffalo horn, and it made great picks. My guitar player that was in my band at the time just swore by them. He loved them. Anyway, I've got a nice long flat area here, and that's what we're going to need to cut the saddle out of. Now that I have this flat, I can lay it on this table and flatten off the next side. And I think I'm going to go ahead and flatten off this point in this, and this, I think this will flatten off fairly quickly. So we're going to go with that next. Okay, now that we have a flat and square surface, I'm going to go to the bandsaw and try to rip out a piece that's going to be big enough to make this saddle out of. I don't want to waste the customer's material. However, this is a very odd-shaped piece of stuff, and so this is a real deep dish in here. I don't know how deep. Well, you can see how deep it is, but it's really deep, and there's a big ridge here.
This area here has got the big seam going through it. I don't really want to use this edge. I want to use this thicker area right here and make most of the saddle out of this flat area here. So I'm going to turn it on that flat side that we cut, flat side down on the table, this flat side against the rip fence, and I'm basically going to rip off most of this area here. And we'll see how that goes. You can see the line that where they press this material together. And I don't like that seam. That seam I know is going to be weaker than the rest of it. So I'm trying to get, I hope this is wide enough to get one saddle out of. It looks like it's just going to be heavy enough, just barely, to get the saddle out of this thicker part right here. This would be considered the height of the saddle, but I'm going to put it over here and just check it, and I've got about an 1/8 inch more room than the height of this. So I'm going to, cut it an 1/8 inch bigger than I need so we can work it down to final size. Okay, that left us with a piece that's tall enough to get the saddle out of, no problem, and a piece just barely wide enough to get it out of there without having that seam in there, I think. Although that's still to be seen. Once again, I have the saw set quite a bit wider than I need. This end appears to be thicker on the seam, so we're going to work from this end, and we'll square it off first, and then we'll cut it about an 1/8 inch longer than we need also. First cut here is just to square the end up. And now the next cut, we're going to leave it about an 1/8 inch long and cut it . Okay, so we've got a block here now that's bigger than the block that we need, and we should be able to bring that down to our size. In the mandolin bridge, I measured the width of the slot, and I got 380 thousandths. Measuring the width of the original saddle, I'm getting 375. So there was about 5 thousandths of play in there. Now that's not very much play, but there was that much play, so it wiggled a little bit, and I don't want no wiggle at all. So measuring the slot at 380, it could be bigger than that because it's a little difficult to measure with these calipers. So my goal is to stop this piece, this rough piece, at 390, 0.390 inches. And that's where we're going to stop, and then we're going to start trying to fit it in the slot to see if it's going to go. Okay, that's 390 thousandths on the nose. And that was our goal, to stop at 390. As I suspected, 390 won't go. As I told you, I measured it at 380. So now we're going to take it down a few more thousandths. That worked great. That it just barely fit in there, and barely. And so I just did a spring pass. I didn't change the height, and to just take off a teeny tiny bit more, and we should be good to go there now. Let's see. You can see that it will go down in there. It goes in there nice and snug. No play at all. Goes in all locations. Now we're going to do the same thing with the end. We're going to try to make the end the exact length it needs to be so that it goes in there and it doesn't do this. I measured the slot length, and the slot length at the widest place is 2 inches 335 thousandths. I measured this at the widest place, and it's only 2 inches 310 thousandths. So there's about 25 thousandths play there on this, and that's quite a bit of play. It was just flopping around in there. The first thing we're going to do in order to get this to the proper length is we're going to take one end, we're going to round it off to make it match the curves that are already in the slot. So there's a little bit of a curvature to it, so we're going to do that on one end first. It's still plenty long, and then we'll shorten it to the right length and round off the other end. I don't think I got that on camera, sorry about that, but anyway, what I did was I set this at 2 inches, 300, and I actually set it at 336 thousandths, which is a thousandth longer than I needed. And then I scribed a line across there with this. And if I check this right now, I've already ground it down. I'm showing it's a little bit long. It's about 10 thousandths long right now. So we're going to take off just a fraction more. It looks like it measures 335 and a half, so I'm hoping that'll squeeze right down in there just perfectly tight. And because of the angle that it's going in there, it doesn't want to go, but I think it'll go if I get it straight. Yeah, it's going to go right down in there just perfect, just literally perfect. Looks like it grew in there. We have this down to 480 thousandths on the money, right on the nose. And now I'm going to, or I just thought I'd mention one more thing I did. I took some 220 sandpaper, which is a little finer than, well, it's twice as fine as what I have on my sanding machine in there. And I just rubbed all the surfaces that are going to come in contact with the slot, and lightly, and then I also beveled the bottom and the ends just slightly so that when it goes down in there nothing will catch. So it should go in there nice and snug still, but yet it should just go down in there all the way. And now that we have the block to basically the exact same size, now we'll start working on seeing what we can do with these bevels and the intonation. I've decided how I'm going to do this. I've got my pencil lines, you might be able to see them, drawn across the top where the intonation should be. Now, since this one is beveled on both sides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the sander and just make a rough bevel on both edges and not get into my pencil marks yet, but I'm going to get rid of most of the material just with the big sander. I've beveled both sides up to the edge of the pencil marks, of the closest pencil mark to each of those sides, is the best way I can think to say that. And now I will work on, this by hand and try to get the beveling completed. This side here is the treble side, and I'm just taking a rough file and filing to where my pencil mark is. You can see that we've got it filed there. I moved everything to where I think the intonation should be. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's just a guess at this point. I mean, it's just the best guess I can make. We have the saddle sitting in there, and now we're going to bring it up to pitch. Pretty darn good. Okay, action-wise, we're not bad either. It's already pretty low. So that's the only thing that bothers me about that is working on this radius. Wish I had left it a little bit higher yet, because I definitely left it 20 thousandths higher than what was on there. The action's already pretty darn good. Even at the nut, I just eyeballed that in. I tell you, it's pretty close. The A string might be a fraction high, the E string might be a fraction high. We're going to attempt to radius this And I say attempt because, like I said, we're just about where we need to be. And it can't go very much. Okay, I have done a lot of tweaking off camera. I have got this action here really low where you just barely have to press it to get it to note, and it doesn't buzz or anything. Actually, the G string's probably still a hair high. I'll probably work on it a little bit more. There is a lot of relief now in this. I mean, you can see that it does follow the curve quite a bit. But it's more of a step down, and I want it to look a little more rounded. So all I'm going to do is just take this back out of here and just give it a little bit more of a rounded look. Okay, that's about as good as it's going to get. It's looking kind of rounded now, and I think we've kept the same intonation and everything. So I think we're in good shape, and we're going to put it on there now and give it one last test. Well, there she is. Give you a good close-up of the saddle, and that's a buffalo horn saddle. And it's got the full-blown radius, and the intonation's very good, the action's very good. But now for confession time. That's the second one. The first one, I couldn't get it just where I wanted it. It was close. I mean, it fit the slot and everything was fine. That was not an issue. But the intonation just wasn't perfect on this one. And so the first one, yeah, not so much. We took it off, and I used that one to go to school on to make this next one. I had to end up moving this G string all the way back. I mean, to the very back of the saddle, and it's still 3 cents sharp, and I've got it all the way to the back. I ended up moving every one of them a little bit. But it turned out pretty good. I mean, I'm really happy with it. It looks awesome. I mean, it really looks nice. The action is incredibly low. This is a very low action. I adjusted the action up here a lot too, got it even lower than I had it. And it plays really nice, really easy. It's got a totally different sound than my bluegrass mandolins, of course. And this fellow says in his letter that he doesn't play bluegrass. So, I'm sure that's just perfectly fine. Well, I hope you like this little setup video on the Ovation Mandolin. I appreciate you watching. Thanks to all the new subscribers. Tell your friends about the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so now. And if you wouldn't mind, give me a thumbs up. That sure helps get these videos out in front of other people. And that helps all of us. Thank you very much.